Well, how you doing, everybody? Today's a good day because in this episode, we're going to go deep into the entire process that we use at Clear B2B. And we're going to include all the models, all the processes, and all the tools that we currently use for GTM, for going to market. Now, a couple of words about this. This is a work in progress, meaning this list and these processes, they'll never be final because at least every 2 to 3 months, we change stuff. And then other things stop working. We change strategies. We add to the stack. We remove tools from the stack, as it is to be expected. I mean, this is B2B go-to-market after all. And nothing is constant. Everything's always changing. Even though we do this for a living and we get pretty good results, I still feel that we don't have this entirely figured out. And I don't think we ever will. And I don't think it's a problem because of the nature of the thing, because, it's always changing. We're always experimenting. We're always breaking things. And, it's just a constant evolution. And I love it that way. And I hope you do too. So approach this with an open mind. I'm doing this so that, we expose that we're transparent about the things that we do. All the tools except for one that you're going to see in this document and you're going to hear in this episode are tools that we're constantly using and that we have tested. And there's one tool in there that we're just beginning to test. But other than that, everything is tested and validated by the boys and girls at Clear. And, I hope you can make use of it. I hope you can put it into your stack, into your processes. Feel free to steal from this. That's why I'm doing it. And I hope you have a great time. So let's dive into it. So definitions. Number one, got to get clear on a couple of concepts before we dive into this. So what do people mean by go-to-market? Well, we keep saying we've swapped the word marketing and sometimes even sales in a lot of contexts to go-to-market, because we're usually talking, when we're speaking about B2B campaigns, we're talking about sales, marketing, and sometimes even customer success activities that get people to spend money with your company, that get people to buy your product and service and then repurchase it, renew, and expand in its usage. Okay, so whenever we're talking about these things, which we usually are, then we refer to this set of practices as go-to-market, GTM. Okay, now ABM, it's a very similar beast to GTM, because all that account-based marketing means is that rather than doing the traditional approach of go-to-market, which is get a bunch of leads, so concentrate on the volume of leads, which then a sales team or an SDR team has to qualify, and then push that down the pipeline and then get closers to close it. Rather than that, we're taking a much more qualitative approach. And we are realizing that we're not targeting individual people, individual leads, but we want to focus on well-defined accounts, okay? Because the whole thing that we're doing, this relates to high-ticket offers. So B2B deals that cost at least $15,000 per year. And when you're at this price level, when you're at this deal size, it almost always makes a lot of sense to customize your offering, your messaging, and your entire approach to a subset of companies. Or if the deal size is big enough, then even one single company. Okay. So this is all about personalization and all about customization so that you can create the best buyer experience in a way that makes financial sense for your company. Okay. So we refer to these practices as account-based marketing, but it also encompasses sales and it makes up a bulk of your go-to-market activities. Okay. All right. With that out of the way, what are the components that you need to get deals? And this by far is the best model that we have used to explain everything that we're doing, everything that will take your offering, your product or service from being virtually unknown into the hands of the ideal buyers, okay? So we call this the GTM Delta, and it's got 4 parts to it. And we're going to start at the bottom left because it starts with the market. So you start by understanding the market, the information needs of the market, your ideal customer profile. then you got to get straight on the message. So by message, we usually mean positioning, your core messages, your brand narrative, and other things. Then you've got to have the assets in place. In other words, the marketing assets and the sales collateral that is going to be used to create awareness and then educate people and then move them down the pipe. Okay, and finally, the fourth component of your GTM is action. These are the campaigns. This is when we're actually engaging the market. And these are all the campaigns that we usually run, which fall into 4 categories: warm-up campaigns, activation campaigns, nurturing campaigns, and general demand capture, digital demand capture, okay? And so we keep referring to this framework, the GTM Delta, when we talk about go-to-market components. And obviously the idea is that you want to have all 4 in place, because if anything is missing from this pyramid or this delta, then you have a pyramid that's going to fall on your head, right? And you don't want that to happen. Okay. The other thing we look at when we start working with a company is their GTM maturity, okay? In other words, how far down the journey are they in their use of go-to-market tools, tactics, strategies, and principles in general, okay? And we found that almost all companies fall into one of 4 categories, and we call these the 4 archetypes, the B2B growth archetypes. And the 2 dimensions we use to determine maturity is, number 1, like the scope and the depth of go-to-market. And what we mean by that is how far down the pipeline, how far down the funnel, if you will, are you engaging your buyers when it comes to creating awareness and then building demand, educating customers, and selling to them? And does your GTM activity span after purchase phases? Meaning, are you present with your GTM team when it comes to onboarding and when it comes to expanding deals? And how aligned are these departments and components and functions? Okay. So on the one end, on the one extreme, you obviously have multiple channels in several life cycle stages, doing full-blown GTM and account-based marketing. And on the other end of the spectrum down here, you have companies which, only resort to a few channels, like founder-led sales, and that's about all that they do, and everything is ad hoc, and they don't really have things figured out yet, okay? Again, nothing here is good or bad. It's a question of maturity. So it's like, a 3-year-old is no worse than a 30-year-old. They're just less mature most of the time, okay? And the other dimension that we use to figure this out and to determine maturity, GTM maturity, is the primary go-to-market driving force. And what we mean by that is that more sophisticated, more evolved companies have figured out that the primary driving force should be buyer centricity and providing value. So we call these the value-driven companies. And again, this is a spectrum. And on the other end of the spectrum, less mature companies are very transaction-driven. So, when you talk to them, they'll say things like, we need leads and more leads and a bunch of leads. And you can pretty quickly tell that they don't really care about providing value. They don't, buyer experience, this concept isn't even around in their thinking. And so this type of go-to-market is less successful and totally doesn't work in most of the sophisticated markets where competition is high and buyers are sophisticated. There you have to be a lot more involved and be more customer-centric, aka value-driven. Okay, so these are the 2 dimensions we use to measure maturity and to gauge where companies are. And at the low end of the spectrum, the lowest level of maturity is the hunter. Okay, so, hunters and gatherers, if you think about it, the reason we use this analogy is because hunters, they don't really have a strategy. They have like 1 or 2 weapons that they know how to use, and they only know what they're going to eat like 1 week down the line at best. Okay, so like they don't have things figured out. They are very spontaneous and opportunity and tactic driven. Okay, and that characterizes probably 85% of B2B technology companies out there. Okay, next up, But hunters, the problem with staying a hunter is that after a while, you're going to run out of animals and berries to collect and kill. And so what takes the place of a hunter is a more sophisticated form of civilization, which are the farmers and sometimes the Vikings, the sailors. So we call the next stage the sailor. And we call stage 2 or archetype number 2 the sailor because a sailor usually has a plan. They have a single vehicle, which is a boat, but they're able to navigate and they're able to, stay on course and stick close to the plan. Okay. So that's the second stage. The third stage is the knight. And when you get to this stage, you already have marketing and sales that's pretty complex and diversified and have a lot of things figured out. And the final wizard stage, we put companies in this category when we see that they're functioning as a single revenue department. So sales, marketing, and customer success are aligned. They're measuring the right things. They have account plans and, they just got the whole thing figured out. Okay. Now, there is a quiz that we use to determine where you are, and you can click on a link right here and see how you score on this scale and see which category or which archetype you fit into. Okay, now to get to these 4 components, you want to start by, we're starting back down here, bottom left, we want to define the market. So a couple of things that we look at when we're observing the market. One is what's the total addressable market? And we define that by all the companies that you can sell to in the near future, not necessarily now, because maybe you don't have all the features and components in place yet, but there are companies who you have a realistic chance at targeting and closing 3 to 5 years down the line. Okay. Now, within the total addressable market, we like to use the term total relevant market, which is a pretty common term. And what we mean by it is companies who you can realistically sell to right now, meaning they fit your ideal customer profile firmographically, maturity-wise, and organizationally, geography-wise. And so they're your relevant market. You have a realistic chance of entertaining them and closing them in the near future. Okay. And inside of your total relevant market, you have the intent accounts, meaning if you're doing sales and marketing activities, there are going to be companies who show signals that they are sales ready. So there are going to be companies who are going to signal one way or another that they're ready. Obviously, inbound leads who raise their hands and fit ICP, they're going to fall into this category, but also companies who are engaging with your content or companies who are emitting third-party signals, buying signals, and they fit your ICP, they're going to fall into this category. Okay, so we just want to get clear on what the size is and what the definition is of each of these 3 categories, like within your market. Right. Then what we want to get clear on is your ideal customer profile. And there's a lot of confusion around this term because your ideal customer profile is actually a company. Okay, so not the individual people inside the company who you're going to talk to, but the firmographically, it's a company. Okay, so what we do is we go on a little workshop with our clients and we figure out like which industries, what strategic goals, what main challenges and pain points, and what maturity level characterizes the companies which are the best fit clients currently. And we want to get very conscious about this and list out the factors and brainstorm everything that will point us in the direction of when we look at a prospective company, do they have the qualities and characteristics that make them an ideal customer for us? Okay, and a lot of companies, when they do this exercise, they stop at general stuff, firmographic stuff. So size, revenue, geography, and a few of those things that are really easy to research using a Sales Navigator or an Apollo search and a filter. Okay, And then they end up with way more companies than they can chew and handle. So we like to go a lot deeper because the fun only begins when you get stuff like strategic goals and main challenges and pain points in there, okay? And to determine your ideal customer profile, you first of all want to interview your ideal companies who have already bought from you, okay? And if you don't have any of those, obviously you're going to have to make a lot of guesses, but you can still interview prospective companies about, what their pain points are, their main challenges, what they're struggling with, how they're solving the needs that you fill currently without your help. You can still get a lot of intelligence about that, even if you are entering a totally new segment or a new market. Then comes defining the buyer persona, so the people who are gonna take part in the decision-making process. So what we're talking about here is all the people who form a so-called buying committee, okay? Because if this wasn't obvious to you, then newsflash, in B2B, you don't have just single people buying in and of themselves and by themselves. You have multiple people taking part in the decision-making process, okay? Even though you have just one person who's going to sign the contract and one person who will wire the money to you, you're going to have at least 3 or 4 people take part in researching and choosing the ideal solution for themselves, okay? And you want to get clear that once you have the ideal customer, the ideal company defined, who are the people and what roles do they play in the research and the selection and the decision-making process, okay? And we use this table for that. Here are some of the dimensions. And what you want to focus on really is the champion. And the champion is the person who is not going to be the decision maker, but they're going to be the most active. They're usually the closest to the problem that you solve. And they're going to be present throughout the buying cycle. And they're the ones who can get you to talk to decision makers, because decision makers are usually hard to reach. And most people try to target decision makers straight out of the gate, which is a mistake because they're super hard to get to most of the time. But what you want to do is build up great champions who are going to champion your solution and actually help sell it internally. Okay, and then what we do is we identify stages of the buyer journey. So we take a look at how a typical purchase is done in your marketplace. And we usually use the stages defined in the bow tie. And this is a model by Winning by Design. And yeah, I'm just going to go quickly through it. So you have the acquisition part, and then you have the expansion part. And sales and marketing people tend to forget about the expansion part, even though that's where most of the money is, and they just focus on the acquisition part. Don't do that. Don't be that guy, okay? So focus on both front end and back end money. So before the sale and after the sale. Because before the sale, your go-to-market has to fulfill 3 major roles, okay? So they have 3 jobs. First, you have to generate awareness. Then you have to educate the buyer. Then you have to help them choose a solution. And then you actually have to close them and take their money. And when that is done, after the sale, what you do is your customer success team onboards them, gets them acquainted, gets them on board. They're going to help them achieve impact with your solution. And then you're going to need to help them grow further with your solution and give them additional opportunities to buy from you, basically, okay? And we're going to take a look at what's going on in your buyer journey in each of these stages for your buyers, okay? Then we're back up at the message part of the GTM Delta, okay? So everything we just talked about concerns the market, okay? And then we go into the message, which is all about positioning and your brand narrative and your core messages, okay? And some of the major things that we look at here are the before-after transformation matrix. So we want to get super clear on how it is that you achieve transformation for your buyers, okay? And we use a little matrix for that that you can see over here. And we basically observe things according to 4 dimensions. It's like, what do they have before your solution? Like, what are the material things that they have before, and what will they have after they will have succeeded with your solution. Okay, then what sort of feelings did they battle with before using you and choosing you? And what does that look like? Like, how does it look on a psychological level after they will have succeeded with your solution? Okay, and then the third thing we look at is the average day. In other words, the jobs to be done. So what did the jobs to be done look like before your solution? And how did this transform after having succeeded with your help? Right? And yeah, we usually do this in the form of a brainstorm. So it's a couple of workshop sessions where we fill this out, and then people will vote on the 3 most significant ones. And the nice thing about this is that it's going to give you a lot of ammunition for messaging. So when your product marketing team creates messaging, this is like super ammunition for them. Okay. Optional. What we like to do is, especially with high ticket deals, is to create sort of a hook offer, meaning that a lot of times go-to-market teams will try to, pitch their 30K or 300K products straight out of the gate. And even though they might have like a POC in there, a paid trial or a paid POC, they don't really have a solid offer. And a lot of times, if you just change what it is exactly that you offer on the first date, you could radically transform the results of your go-to-market. Okay, so here again, we use a little brainstorming, going deep, a workshopping session with companies, and we figure out, what it is that we can offer, how we can reverse the risk for the buyer, what sort of proof we can put up, what sort of unique mechanism we can display that, sets our solution apart. And then we just cook a really solid, easy to take offer out of this. And we use that in the first go-to-market campaigns. Then you want to nail the narrative. I don't really want to get too far into this. What we use is we try to build up a story according to the story brand structure and the story brand framework. And the reason for that is that you want to stand out by building up and repeating a compelling narrative that just sucks the buyer straight into your story, so that they recognize themselves and they realize that, whoa, these people really understand my problems. And that creates a very strong bond, like stronger than any other marketing or, arguments or whatever benefit-driven language can give them. If you have a compelling story where they're the hero, and you're able to deliver that story consistently across channels, across mediums, then that's going to be a very, very beneficial thing for your brand and your go-to-market. Okay, assets. We're in the middle of the GTM delta. We're right here. This is the heart and soul of it, even graphically and in real life too. Okay, so what assets are basically content and collateral that helps your buyers understand you better. Okay, and just a couple things that we have there. Number one, we want to set up tracking, because it's always good to be tracking stuff. So we use Dealfront and Leadfeeder to identify ICP visitors on websites. We also use Google Analytics. Then we create a content cadence, and from our content stack, this is a major part of it, Descript, which helps us turn videos into transcripts and into little video snippets and other content forms. So it's an important part of it. For AI and AI assisted writing, we use Perplexity, which is sort of an AI aggregator, because it lets you choose between several paid models like Claude and GPT-4. And they're always adding new stuff, and so we get to play with several tools that give us a lot more text and tokens than your typical GPT-4 model or GPT 3.5, so that we can use it for long form stuff as well. Okay, now actions. So we're at the top of the GTM delta right now, and this is where really the rubber meets the road. It's where we engage clients. And, before we jump into that, we want to make sure that the KPIs are set up right. So, you want to match your KPIs in every single buying journey stage. So if you go back to the bow tie over here and you look at the typical buyer journey, what you want to do is get clear on what your KPIs are going to be in each of these buyer journey stages. So here you typically have the MQL between awareness and education, and then you typically have the SQL between education and selection, and you have retention metrics back here in the back end. Whatever it is that you choose, you want to get super clear on it and aligned with everybody on the team. So these are the main demand generation, demand capture, and retention metrics that we like to use. These are our defaults, and obviously we tweak them and change them according to what sort of organization we're dealing with and what they're already using. But the important thing is that we track this on a month-to-month basis, and we have our own little simple spreadsheets for that. Then it comes time to create a target account list. So once we have the market identified and once we have everything laid out, we got to build a target account list, because this is account-based marketing after all. So the way we do that is we use several data sources, and we use those data sources through a tool called Clay, which lets you build lists, company lists, from various sources, and it can even scrape the internet. And so it's a pretty powerful tool. And not only that, but it also helps you enrich the data. So, once you have company data, it can help you enrich company data, and then it can help you find people at those companies and then enrich their personal data so that you can actually reach out to them. And it can even help you, with the help of AI, write personalized messages based on all the data that it's enriched. So there's a lot of playing around to be done with Clay, because you can really personalize your messages and you can get super creative. This used to be the job of SDRs, but with a tool like this, it's just a one-man show, and you're cutting down weeks into hours with this tool. So we're really using this almost on a day-to-day basis. Again, it can help you craft emails, and then you can connect Clay to whatever email outbound tool you use. Okay. By the way, we do have like a longish 25-minute video on how we use Clay. So if you're interested in that advertisement, there's a free GTM Essentials course from Clear. Your friends at Clear, that's us. And if you click this link up over there, then you get free access to that course, which has a bunch of videos. And the guy talking on the screen is very similar to the one talking on this screen. So that's the only drawback, by the way. But if you can bear that, then there's a ton of helpful material for you on how to use Clay. A proper setup with your outbound, meaning if you're doing some heavy email outbound marketing, then what you want to do is you want to have several inboxes, and you want to make sure that you have a very good grip on deliverability, and that you're constantly testing whether or not you're landing in spam. And you want to make sure that you have, auto rotation of inboxes, and you're optimizing tracking. Okay. So if you're doing some heavy outbound email, which we usually don't because we don't need to, LinkedIn and all the other stuff does a fairly good job for us, then you want to use something like this. And this is the only tool. It's Smartly.ai that we haven't actually tested that much yet. We're just getting into it now. So this is the only tool in this list that we don't have extensive experience with. Okay, but what we do use on a day-to-day basis is Expandy. And it's a tool that allows you to launch multi-channel campaigns with a special focus on LinkedIn. Okay, so it's the probably most diverse set of functions when it comes to LinkedIn, because it can do in-mails, and it can do, profile visits. It can do automatic likes of posts, and it can do a bunch of things that most of the other guys can't. And you can combine all of this with email. Okay, so this is the reason we're using Expandy, because in most scenarios, we're doing most of the outbound emails through Expandy mixed in with various LinkedIn activities automated. Okay. And one thing we've recently added to the stack, and we're liking it a lot, is SendSpark. And SendSpark allows you to create these personalized videos where AI is going to fake your voice and it's going to say, hey, Billy, and hey, Jimmy, and hey, Ann, and hey, Susie, even though you've recorded it only once, and it's going to display their respective websites on the background over here. So it's a pretty nifty little tool, and it lets you create these personalized landing pages as well. So we're having a lot of fun with it and seeing some nice results. Okay, and lastly, when it comes to campaigns and outreach, we love to do PPC advertising, okay? Because any outbound campaign will get wings if you have a corresponding and aligned pay-per-click and account-targeted campaign running alongside it, okay? And our two go-to platforms are Meta, especially Instagram, where you can't really target accounts, but it's going to do a good enough job of finding your target audience. And obviously LinkedIn. Okay, so we love to use these two platforms. Okay, now, how do you keep all of this in sync? Okay, it's like everything that we just talked about, like it's a lot. And then you have the data, you have the performance data, you got to be tracking KPIs, and you need to be running the right campaigns in the first place. Okay, so how do we make sure that all of that happens? That's where our proprietary framework, revenue growth mapping, comes in. And with revenue growth mapping, what you get is a pretty straightforward process, which takes you all the way from planning to setting up KPIs, mapping out campaigns for the various buyer journey stages. And it helps you set up and map and then track all the activities that sales, marketing, and customer success need to be doing on a regular basis. And it just helps these three teams stay aligned and stay on course. So it's a tool that we use with clients once they get, sophisticated enough that they need to use a tracking mechanism like this, but not yet mature enough for some like big ass platform like Clary or something like that. It's a free tool. Basically, it's a spreadsheet that's worked really well for teams between like 5 people to all the way to 15 people. So it's a solid thing. You can access this as well, by the way. It's free. There are a bunch of video walkthroughs that we've created so that you can use it. And this pretty much concludes our overview of all the tech stack and tools and processes that we use. It's intentionally lean, so we don't like to be using a bunch of tools because you don't need a lot of tools. So we try to break it down to the essentials. We do use most of these tools to their strongest advantage, meaning that these tools can usually span a wide range of activities, but we tend to use them only for the core that they're the best at, okay? Clay is an exception because Clay is good at everything, but for everything else, we tend to use only their strongest features, okay? So I hope this was helpful for you, and if you're not getting results, then it's probably not about the magic tool that you're looking for. So people like to be swayed into thinking that, oh, if I only had a tool for this or a tool for that, that would help fix our go-to-market problems. Well, it ain't going to fix your go-to-market problems. AI can't fix it for you. Nothing can fix it for you except a good go-to-market strategy and the discipline and the ability to follow through on your campaigns. Okay. So with that, thanks for sticking with us in this episode. See you.